This today's session is co-hosted by TIS Bombay, BAM, Bharatidasan University, DG Vaishnav College, and Madras School of Social Work, along with Feminism in India and Human Rights Advocacy and Research Foundation. Today's session will be on digital empowerment, enabling strategies to handle online challenges by Jacqueline Pasricha. I hope I got your name right, Jacqueline. Over to, and this session will be moderated by Ritik from DG Vaishnav College, uh, our co-host for today, the college, our co-host college for today. Over to you, Ritik. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm J. Ratik from DG Vaishnav College, Chennai. For today's topic, digital empowerment, enabling strategies to handle online challenges, we have our speaker, Japlin Pasricha, the founder, director, Feminism in India. Japlin smashes the patriarchy of a living. So she is the founder, director, and editor-in-chief of Feminism in India, that is FII, an award-winning digital feminist media platform. She is also a TEDx speaker and was recognized as a young innovator in 2018 by World Summit Awards. Prior to starting FII, she worked with multiple women's rights NGO in India like Breakthrough India and Point of View. She has also worked with Freedom House, a non-profit based in the USA, on a research report and advocacy campaign on online violence against women. She was featured by the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development in a book on women in tech for her work at FII and facilitated by Menaka Gandhi and Ministry of Women and Children Development, the Government of India as Web Wonder Women. She has also been recognized by the Swedish Foreign Ministry for her work on the gender gap on Wikipedia. Currently, Japan oversees the strategic vision and growth at FII. We are grateful to have you, ma'am. I request you to take over the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Brinda, and thank you, Ritik, for such a lovely introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Japleen Pasricha, and as already introduced by Ritik, I am the founder and editor of Feminism in India, which is an online digital feminist media platform. We do multiple things. For example, we publish a bilingual magazine in English and in Hindi, talking about various issues from a socio-economic, political lens, and writing from a feminist perspective on these issues. We also create multimedia content like videos, infographics, posters, and social media content. Our target audience is mostly the youth and students like you who are at college and university and studying similar topics and similar subjects. So today we will be talking about digital gender-based violence and also digital empowerment and how to manage, such scenarios where you would face trolling or harassment or other such scenarios in a digital world, since especially due to the pandemic, all of us are now heavily uh, dependent on digital devices and digital world in general. So we have 90 minutes for today's session. We have to close the session at 5, and I want to keep the session as interactive as possible. So instead of us having a question and answer towards the end, what I would suggest is that all of you, you have feel free to post your questions in the chat box itself whenever you do have a question, and I will try to answer as many. I will keep a watch on the chat box and try to answer as many as possible during my talk itself so that it becomes more interactive. I have just one request that I do not speak Tamil, so I would really request everybody to post their questions only in English. And if you need help with translation, then maybe you can reach out to Brinda for that. Okay, so I have the chat box with me. So again, as I said, feel free to post your questions. We will start the session now. So when we talk about digital violence, or let's say gender-based violence, but in an online context, um, the first thing that comes to mind is that it's not violence, because violence for us is very strictly defined as something that happens in a physical scenario. Like if somebody pushes you, or somebody hurts you physically or sexually, or pulls your hair, or slaps you, these are considered as legit forms of violence. But whenever we talk about gender-based violence in an online context, a lot of people don't consider it as violence, first of all. And that's a very important point to note, that how do we define violence? Like, is violence always physical? Or can mental health issues be also considered as violence? If because of someone's behavior online, the other person is facing mental health issues, or they are feeling violated, then does that count as violence? So that's one very important question that we all need to think about, of how we define violence and what we consider as violent. Now, most of the activists working on the topic of gender issues in general, and then gender-based violence, both in online and offline spaces, consider trolling and harassment as a form of violence. So I'm sure that all of you are active on social media websites like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and also, to some extent, follow news on such platforms, or you must be aware of what is currently going on, especially up north. From where I come, I'm from Delhi, and up north right now we are having huge protests from farmers, a huge protest by farmers who are trying to enter Delhi, but the state governments from Haryana and Punjab are trying to stop them, and also Delhi police is trying to stop them to enter. And this is all over our social media, right? So I'm sure like there are similar stories from your area, from your region, from your community that you see on social media. And because now all of us are on using some kind of digital device or some kind of digital space due to the pandemic, and we have to accustom ourselves to such a context where being digital is just, it's not possible to not be digital, to not be in some kind of digital space. I'm sure you have come across you know arguments or discussions which turn heated when we talk about uh, any issue which is a social justice issue or a political issue, or even as simple as discussing since most of you are in college, I'm assuming your colleges have curfew timings for your hostels. And in a lot of scenarios, we see that curfew timings are different for boys hostel and girls hostel. And that has also been a very popular topic among student activism and in campus activism. Sorry. Yeah, thanks, Brinda. So this is a common topic that I'm sure that has been discussed within your social groups also. So the point that I'm trying to make is that in online spaces, especially when all of us are, especially in this pandemic, when all of us are online, and that's the only space that we have to have any kind of conversations, there's bound to be arguments, and there's bound to be, disagreements. And also, the problem with online spaces is that any argument that, if that same argument of that same conversation was happening in face-to-face scenario, the it may not turn as ugly into an argument as it would in the online space. And we have seen a trend where we see that people are more mean, they are more rude in online spaces than they would actually be if you're talking to them face to face. And one of the biggest reasons for this is because an online space gives you anonymity. It gives you that space where you can be anyone, where you don't have to be the person that you are. You can hide behind anonymous profiles. You can hide behind, you don't have to have your image, have your photograph, have your name. So you can be anyone, and that's a trend that we have seen, that any kind of discussion that happens online tends to be has more conflict, or tends to be more mean and more rude. And this is just one form of discussions and disagreements. Now, coming a little to the activism space, which is where I come from. I am a feminist activist, and I get trolled almost daily on social media. And also the organization that I run, which is Feminism in India, we talk about feminist issues, about gender issues. We also get trolled almost daily, because the topics that we talk about are difficult topics, are topics that disturb the social fabric of our nation, of our cultures, and question this social fabric of patriarchal norms and gender stereotypes. So trolling then kind of becomes a everyday part of our work. Now, another point that's very interesting that usually comes up in discussions like these is, you know, like that there is a difference in the real world or the offline world versus the online world. And what a lot of people believe, that um, the internet as a space is a neutral space, because the internet is a space where everybody has equal access, and everybody can come on any platform, create any account, get take part in any discussion, etc., etc. However, that's not really true. Now, so first of all, as we have seen that gender-based violence or violence against women is a global problem, right? It's not restricted to India, and it's not restricted to a certain country or a certain culture. It's a global problem across countries and across cultures. So when a societal problem like that exists in the real world, it will obviously come in the online world also. And the very simple reason and very simple answer to that is that the people who we meet in the real world are the same people who are on the internet. So the internet is actually a reflection of the society that we live in. It's not a different society. It's not a different space. It's not a different planet or a alien space. It is the same space that we, like, for example, you're meeting somebody in a cafe for coffee and whatever, and you're meeting that same person in a Zoom call. So it's the same person. The platform has changed, but the people will remain the same. So internet is and digital spaces, they are a reflection of the society that we live in. And as elsewhere all over the world, and also in India, online harassment of gender-based violence is rampant, in contrast to the internet's initial premise of equal opportunity and neutrality. So, what we have today is a flawed internet that reflects the offline world we live in, where women in marginalized communities are abused, harassed, threatened, stalked, and violated on a daily basis. I did a study back in 2016, which is where also my research findings are coming from. In this study, I surveyed 500 women, um, and out of those 500 women, I also conducted interviews of about 20 women. The study was to understand if there is a greater gendered impact of trolling in the online spheres, and if women face a more severe form of trolling, and if yes, why, and what is the reason behind that. So in my study, I found out that most of the women have said that they face some kind of trolling or harassment or abuse on the internet. And the reasons were very similar, that if they are the kind of person who talks about what's going on in the news or raises their voice about important issues, be it at their home or in their campus or with their friends, if they talk about politics, if they talk about religion, if they talk about gender issues, these are some top topics that always invite violence, that always invite trolling, abuse, harassment, etc., etc. And So basically, what that study found out was that if you have an opinion and you're putting that opinion out there, and that opinion is, about things that are considered important. So politics, for example, or, any protests that are happening, in the news, or things about dress codes in colleges or curfew timings in campuses. These are important things where especially we are told not to question them. So when you question such things, you are always met with criticism, and in this scenario, a lot of trolling and harassment. Another interesting finding that I found in my research was that what were the impacts of this trolling? So a lot of people, a lot of women said that they f- that they have mental health issues because of the trolling. That they suffer from depression and anxiety, insomnia, and also that they self-censored themselves, which means that they either deleted their account and they got off that platform because of the amount of trolling that they were receiving, or they altered the way they used the platform. So for example, if earlier they were very open about very vocal about gender issues or sexuality issues or politics or protests, or any campus movements, that they don't talk about that now as often as they did before, because they realize that talking about these issues invites more trolling. So they altered the way that they are using the platform. And yeah, and as I said, mental health issues, that was a really big point that came across in the study. Then the next interesting finding that we found out was um, that it's not like only women are trolled on the internet. Men are also trolled for talking about similar issues that women also are also trolled for. However, the difference is in the way that they are abused. So women said that they usually receive derogatory remarks about their gender and sexuality. And apart from this survey, I also went through profiles of high profile female activists and female journalists. For example, Barkha Dutt, Sheila Rashid, uh, Rana Ayub, and other top female journalists like these. And I found out that um, first of all, they are trolled on a regular basis, right, left, and center. And a lot of this is very derogatory remarks about their gender and sexuality, and also direct threats to their life. So this is also a finding that came out of the survey, was that women receive derogatory remarks about their gender, which men don't. They receive threats about their life, and they receive rape threats. And this is not just something that journalists, but even politicians. So even if we are looking at politicians of the current government, which is Smriti Irani or Menaka Gandhi, they also receive trolling and comments about their gender. So here actually gender plays a much more important role than anyone's political leanings. And sending rape threats and death threats to a woman, or talking about their family and their children, is something also that was very common, because it wanted to invoke that feeling of fear, where that I will come and I know where you live, or I will rape you, or I will kill you, or I know where your children go to school. These were some common threats that especially top female activists, journalists receive, because the idea is to is to silence them. And how they are trying to do that is by invoking fear. Now, couple of other findings. One was how these women are responding to online violence. So many said that they either report to the platform, or if it's if it's a threat to their life and to their families, then they also report to the police. They use the block button very frequently. Then a lot of people said that that they also, although they do try to reach out to the police, they are not very confident about doing that. They are not very confident of reaching out to law enforcement, because they believe that the law enforcement, basically that the cops, the police will not understand the issue. And that's a recurring theme that has come up in this research, is that because there is a culture of victim blaming, of slut shaming, where uh, the society asks the woman, why were you out here at this time? What were you wearing? What were you doing with this person? Why did you have to put up your pictures? Because there's already this existing culture, and we have seen that in so many cases of gender based violence in the offline world, in the real world, that women find it very uncomfortable, and they are not confident to reach out to police and or to law enforcement agencies, because they feel that they would be shamed and blamed for whatever has happened to them. And especially in cases of like revenge porn. Now, revenge porn is something where a woman's private data, private images, and private videos, which were made in a private scenario, are released without her consent and put on pornographic websites, or just shared via WhatsApp and other such platforms. And this is usually done for revenge. Most of the cases that come under this crime are of ex-partners, ex-boyfriends, sharing this kind of content after their relationship ended, or that the woman said that she's not interested in this person anymore. So as then part of revenge, they do this act. And this is again something that's, although very common, it's very common that this happens to women, but a lot of women do not find uh, solace in reporting it to the law enforcement, because the question would be put on them as to why they created this video in the first place, or why they took a naked picture, a private picture in the first place. So this is another very important form of gender-based violence that happens online and is distributed online, but is not something that's taken seriously by the law enforcement also, because it's always seen, okay, you are the one who consented to the video, or you are the one who consented to the picture, so why are you crying now, right? Yeah. So now coming to the next part of the session, which is, so what is our, so now we have a basic idea of what are the different forms of gender-based violence. I'll just go through them one more time. So online stalking, bullying, trolling, and harassment, that's something that I'm sure everybody understands. Okay, I will come back to this question. It's pretty long. Just let me finish this part and then I'll come back to this question. Okay, so as I was saying, let's first identify the different forms of gender-based violence online, and then we will go into the law. So number one is online stalking, bullying and harassment, and trolling. Then identity theft and impersonation. Now what this means is that if somebody takes your identity, somebody creates an account in my name and takes my picture, and but that person is not me, and they create an account in my name, and then they message my friends or just message random people, whatever, and that's an identity theft of my identity. Then we have breach and violation of privacy. So as I've already given the example of revenge porn, that's breach and violation of privacy. Next, we have voyeurism. Voyeurism means when somebody is recording you without your permission in a private context. So a lot of times this happens, and we have also come across cases where women have complained that they have been recorded in changing rooms at malls and stores, or in trial rooms at some clothing store, or in hotels. A lot of couples have also, there have been news of couples being recorded in privately without their consent. So this is called voyeurism. Then Editing photos for malicious intent. That's another form of online gender-based violence where somebody's photograph is put on a pornographic website or on somebody's face is morphed on a pornographic image to show as if they are there when they are not. Then we have doxing. Doxing is also a very, very serious crime. And doxing is basically when your private information, for example, your home address, your mobile number, your email address, and your office address, or any kind of information that's private and that's also could be life threatening, is put online or is put in public use without your consent. So, for example, if somebody wants to hurt me and they hack somehow my home address and put it online, and then people can actually reach my place, like my home address, they can actually reach there because that address has been put online without my consent, without my permission. That's doxing. Then we have unsolicited messages. I think or most of you know what that means, where you receive messages from random people, random where they are asking you to be your friend or sending you again private images. That's all unsolicited messages. Then we have blackmailing and threatening. That's pretty clear. Hacking, again, when somebody can hack into your accounts. And then we have image-based sexual violence, popularly known as revenge porn, which I've already given an example. I will just copy paste this list into the chat box so that everybody can access it. Okay. Okay, I will read your question now, Mahira. Okay, so since I already said that I'll be talking about laws, I will cover that part. Mahira, regarding your last question, why are we not working on this issue as theoretically in a way more research to know the nuance of this violence? Yes, so this is actually a very important point. So gender-based violence online is still something which has been very recently recognized as a form of violence, because till now, as I said in the beginning, violence is always considered as something physical, which is domestic violence, rape, sexual harassment. These are considered as gender-based violence, but online gender-based violence is not that old a topic, which is why the research on this topic is not a lot. So the research that I published, that was in 2016. It's a 4-year-old research. And before that, there have been, I think, only a couple. Now, I think in 2020, there are more research on this topic, but of course, it's not as exhaustive, as intensive as would, let's say, there would be hundreds and thousands of research on domestic violence or on rape. So I think we also need to understand that digital world is also not very old, and people are, and especially social media, because online violence has actually perpetuated by social media. So social media platforms in itself are just 10 years old. Facebook only Facebook was launched in 2007 or 2008. So it's not something that's very old, but I'm sure there will be more research on this topic. But yes, I do agree that it's not enough right now. I will come back to the laws question when I'm done with that session. Okay, so now we will get into the laws part. I'm not a lawyer or an expert, but I will still tell you very briefly what laws do we have in our country which cover various crimes that I have just listed out. So first of all, we have the IPC, Indian Penal Code, and under that we have the Criminal Amendment Act 2013. It's the same law which also covers rape, and which was amended in 2013 after the 2012 Delhi gang rape and murder case, after the Justice Verma committee recommendations, it was amended to include a lot of things, which also included online gender-based violence. So I'll just tell you what are the different sections under Criminal Amendment Act 2013. So under section 354A, demanding sexual favors and showing pornography against will is a crime. Then under section 354C, voyeurism and disseminating such information without consent is a crime. And under section 354D, cyber stalking, despite clear indication of disinterest, is also a crime. So it's important to note here that now stalking is defined both as physical stalking and online stalking. And online stalking can be somebody repeatedly calling someone even though that person doesn't show any interest, or sending unsolicited messages on any kind of digital or social media platform. All of these come under cyber stalking. Now, apart from the Criminal Amendment Act of 2013, we also have the Information Technology Act of 2008. This also has various sections which cover a lot of crimes that I listed out. So first of all, section 66C covers identity theft. Then section 66E covers violation of privacy. Section 67 covers publication and transmission of obscene content. Section 67A covers publication and transmission of sexually explicit material. Section 67B covers publication and transmission of child pornography. And section 72, breach of privacy and publication of material without consent. So as you can see, and I will again copy paste this in the chat box so that it's easier. As you can see, most of the crimes that I had posted in my list are covered by law, but just one second. Okay. So I have copy pasted both Criminal Amendment Act 2013 and the sections that it covers, and also Information Technology Act 2008. There's just one last thing, which is the Indecent Representation of Women Prohibition Bill 2012, which says that the Indecent Representation of Women Prohibition Amendment Bill 2012 seeks to broaden the scope of the law to cover audiovisual media and content in electronic form, prescribing stringent penalties which would act as deterrent to violation of the law. As per the proposed amendments, distribution of material will also include distribution on the internet. I'll also send this here. Okay. So now we have basically 3 different acts that are covering gender-based violence online. Now again, coming back to the question that Mahira had raised, it's not like we do not have laws in the country which cover gender-based violence. That is not the scenario. We do have, even if they are not perfect, but we have something, right? And at some point, we have to realize that having a law on something is not enough. We also have laws on domestic violence, we have laws against dowry, we have laws against rape, but has that stopped any of these happening? We have everyday cases of rape, we have everyday cases of domestic violence, of dowry, of sexual harassment in campuses and at the workplace. We also have laws against that, but that like having a law doesn't stop anything, and it shouldn't also the society's efforts, and especially the states and the government's efforts, shouldn't stop at just making the law. So what is then that do we actually need to stop instances of gender-based violence both in online world and the offline world? Now, this is not an easy answer, because we are basically talking about a change in people's attitudes and people's mentality towards women and towards marginalized genders and sexualities, where we are, it all comes down to us then talking about why do we have a society where certain attributes are considered as more privileged and certain attributes are not. Or for example, why do we follow a patriarchal system, or why do we follow a Brahmanical system where people from a certain caste are put on top and people from certain caste are put on bottom? So these are questions that first of all need a lot of unpacking from us, and also it's slow process. You cannot change the world and you cannot change how a society thinks in in one night, or even in a decade, or even in a year. Social reform takes a lot of time, and all of us are working on that issue to make, even if we are making a smaller impact, but to make some kind of impact which would then lead to a world which which respects women, or which respects basic equality and equity for everybody, and no discrimination, and no stigma for, especially for people who are coming from marginalized genders and sexualities. I will take the next question. What role does education play in preventing gender-based violence? How to recognize GBV among children and youth on the move? That's great. So again, regarding the first question, what role does education play? So now, first of all, I want to unpack here what education means, because having an engineering degree, or a doctor's degree, or a lawyer's degree, that doesn't mean education in this context, because an engineer, a doctor, a scientist, any successful person can still have the same patriarchal and same patriarchal mentality in their minds. So we first of all need to redefine also how we understand education. For Is education for us a degree which we need to have then a great career, a good job, a well-paying job, or are we looking at education from a more holistic sense? So do we have gender sensitive education in our schools? Are we talking about gender in our schools and colleges? Are we talking about what consent means in our colleges, what sex education means? Because these are all very, very important aspects of education. And education then just doesn't mean getting a degree which will give you a good career and a high paying job, right? So to answer your question in short, is that we first of all need to understand what kind of education we need, which will then prevent or reduce instances of gender-based violence. And that is a more holistic education which talks about concepts like morals and ethics, that talks about consent, that talks about social justice, and also is very conscious in the fact that uh, like who are the privileged people in our society, and how do we need to break such structures of caste, gender, and sexuality, and other such societal structures that we have created, which put some people on top and some people on bottom. Now, the second question, how to recognize GBV among children and youth on the move? That's a really important and very serious question. I can tell you something from my experience, but I also want to just put a disclaimer here that I'm not a child psychologist, and this is actually if a child psychologist or someone who is an expert. I'm also not a parent, so I don't really have much experience with children. If they answer that question, that would be actually better. But I think if we are talking about children who are below 13, who are not teenagers yet, and again I am just saying something out of experience, is one thing would be to monitor their digital use. And I know that a lot of platforms and also devices now have a parental control, where parents can actually see what the child is up to. I think that's really important to keep in check what the child is accessing, what kind of websites, what kind of platforms they are accessing. And secondly, I would also say that talking to children about such issues, and especially talking to children about sex education and consent, is the way to go forward. Because the more adults and parents try to hide from children, the more they will be eager to find out what this means, because they are curious. And it doesn't really work when you don't give them information. So if we as adults and parents don't give this information directly in a age appropriate manner to the child will obviously then try to find out themselves. So I think a better strategy would be for parents to sit down with the children and explain them how what platforms they are going to, how it works, what they need to be careful about, and answer their questions and not hide things, and answer their question. And children of this age will definitely have questions around their bodies, around sex, around around sexual orientation and identity and gender identity. And it's really important that adults answer their questions instead of shutting them down, because when we shut children down, that's when they would try to find out other ways to find this information. Okay, we will move ahead. Okay, so we will come to the mental health part later. I also now want to move to the next part of my session. Just give me 1 minute. Okay, so before we go into the mental health part, which is really important, I want to talk a little about the technical part of how one can secure themselves online. So this is more towards how you can ensure that you don't get hacked, that people are unable to access your profiles and unable to access your accounts, etc. Sorry, 1 second. So when we talk about digital security, the very first thing which is extremely important is how we create our passwords. Now, I'm sure everybody knows, and all of you are young people who use digital platforms, that strong passwords are really, really important, and they are your first line of defense. So anyone who's trying to hack your account, the first thing that they will obviously need to hack is your password. And if you have a strong password, you can fight them right there. Now, how do we create a strong password? The first thing is that your password should not reflect you or your personality. So, for example, person A likes dogs, and they like reading books, and they like going to the beach, and they like eating ice cream. All of these things that I know about this person, that should not reflect in your password. Your password should not be personal. It should not be the name of your pet or your best friend or your boyfriend or girlfriend or your parents or your own name. It should not have your date of birth. It should not have basically any information from which you can be identified. Any such information should not be a part of your password, and your password should be extremely random, and it should have different characters, and it should have both uppercase and lowercase letters, and mixed of random letters. You can even, if you are somebody who knows more than one language, which I think most of the Indians are at least bilingual, if not polylingual, is that you can create your passwords in a multilingual, you can create a multilingual password, or you can create a bilingual password, and you can create something, or you can even come up with your own words that only you will understand, something that you can create from a mix of English and Tamil, or Tamil and Telugu, or whichever other languages that you know. So passwords should be difficult to crack, because they shouldn't identify you. They shouldn't have any information with which you can be identified, uh, even your date of birth. Now, that's the first line of defense that you should have when trying to secure your account. What is this? Okay, I will come back to this in a bit. First, I will first finish my security tips. Now, the second thing that one should keep in mind is two-factor authentication. This is a feature that all online platforms have. Google, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any platform that you are using will have this feature. It's called two-factor authentication. It's a system where you need two or more authentication methods to log in. So, for example, your password plus your fingerprint, or your password and or an OTP or a secret question, etc. Basically, even if somebody is able to crack your password, then you have the second line of defense, which is this two-factor authentication. So on your mobiles, a lot of you, I'm sure, use your fingerprint or a pattern or a pin, and the same can be done on web also. For most of the platforms, Gmail has this, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all of them have this feature. So you should definitely enable this feature, and they would give you an OTP. Then you would enter the OTP after you have entered your password, and then only you can log in. So even if someone hacks your password, is able to crack your password, you will still have the second line of defense. And it's a very rare scenario where you would have both your password is also hacked and your phone is also stolen, or somebody also knows your secret question. So it's a rare scenario where all of these defense points, would be compromised. But otherwise, I would definitely suggest that you use two-factor authentication. Now, then when we talk about privacy on the internet, there are certain things that you can do. For example, instead of using Google as your default search engine, you can use a search engine called DuckDuckGo. I will just uh, write it down so that. So this is a search engine called DuckDuckGo. It's a private search engine, which means that it doesn't track your data, as opposed to search engines like Google, Yahoo, or anything else that you use, which track your data. So you can use tools and softwares and platforms that offer privacy. So, for example, if you are using Google Chrome as your web browser, that's something that doesn't offer privacy, but Mozilla offers privacy. So you can use Mozilla Firefox as your web browser. Or if you also check out this other web browser called Opera, that also has an option to enable the VPN. So I'll just write here Opera and then VPN enabled. So then you can actually access the internet with a VPN, and all the advertisers on the internet will not know where actually you're operating from. So your IP address will be hidden. So even though you're sitting in Chennai, people like the IP address would be, let's say, from New Zealand. So that's also something that you can definitely do. Then yeah, and another thing that you can do to browse the web privately is to use incognito window. If you don't want the browser to to save your history and your cookies and your cache, then you can browse it in incognito window. You can use a VPN. You can as I said, use other browsers like Mozilla Firefox or Opera with a VPN, or you can also use the Tor browser. So this is again a browser which offers privacy, but it's a little slow. So you will have to see if it meets your requirements. Then if you are using, let's say, private message, like if you are conversing with your romantic partner or your sexual partner or your boyfriend or girlfriend, and you want to send private messages or you want to send private images and private videos, then instead of using platforms like WhatsApp or Instagram or any such platform, use platforms that offer offer a service where your images don't get saved, for example, and that's really important. So just 1 second, and I'll give you a list of some of these platforms. So you should definitely not use WhatsApp, Facebook, SMS, etc. to send private pictures, because they could be downloaded, they could be used to blackmail you, or they could be used as revenge porn. Use apps that have end-to-end encryption. So for example, Signal is one app that you can definitely use for such a scenario. And also use apps which have the feature that that image will only be available for some time, like it will auto delete itself in 24 hours, or it will delete after it is being seen. And or platforms that do not require a phone number, like you can use Telegram, for example. The reason why I'm saying this is because today young people are also due to the rise of dating apps like Tinder and Bumble and Hinge. A lot of young people are meeting other young people on such apps, and you may not know that person, but you are sharing a private conversation with them. So it's really important at that time to think of your safety first before you do anything else. And if you are having any kind of private conversation or sharing any kind of private information or images and videos, then definitely do not do it on Tinder or Bumble, or don't do it on WhatsApp also, but use uh, apps and platforms that ensure that your image doesn't get saved or doesn't get screenshotted, or that it's not accessed by someone else. So these are some important things that you should keep in mind if you are in a context where you are sharing private photographs and videos with other people. Now, yeah. And another important thing is that whenever we join any new platform, or like we are on platforms like Instagram, Facebook, Google, etc., it's one thing that is really important is to understand how these platforms work. Like when you're joining a new platform, take some time before creating your profile, or even after you have created your profile, to go through that platform and understand their privacy policies, their marketing policies, their safety and security policies, how they track your data, how they track the information that you share. All of these things are important to understand, to get a insight into what we are sharing with that platform. Like if we are for example on Instagram, which I am assuming is the most popular app with young people, we share a lot of personal images of our pictures with our family and friends, our pets, of us traveling, of us in the university, at home. So we are sharing a lot of personal information and data on such platforms. So it is good to know how is this data being used by that platform, and then you can make a more informed and conscious decision of how much you actually want to share. Do you want to put everything about your life on Instagram, uh, keeping in mind how that data will be used, especially for advertise? I'm sure a lot of you have felt this, that you were talking to your friend about, let's say, buying some equipment or buying a mobile phone, and then suddenly you see an ad of that mobile phone the next day on your Facebook or on Instagram, right? This is something that happens very frequently with people, and this is because these platforms are listening into our chats, and they are listening into, or even the text that we send on Instagram or Facebook or WhatsApp, which is all, by the way, owned by Facebook, the company. Then they use this to direct advertisements towards us, because that's their primary business model. So again, it's important to understand what kind of information we are sharing online and how much we want to share. Now, then coming to the point of redressal mechanisms. So when you are faced with gender-based violence online, it is again important that you first of all report that incident in the platform itself. So if something has happened on Twitter, report it. There are report and block options on each and every platform. So you should definitely report it in that platform. And if you feel the need to report it to the police, then that is also possible. And actually, for gender-based violence online, you don't necessarily have to go and send. You don't have to go and file a FIR. Sorry, can someone please go on mute? There's somebody who's not on mute. Please put your, yeah, thanks. So if you want to report to the police, then you also have the option of not just, you don't have to necessarily go and file a report and do a FIR, but you can actually do it over email. Yeah. So that is also an option available for you to file your whatever report that you want to file over email, and you don't necessarily have to go to the police station to file the FIR. Now, I'll just take the questions that were posted here later. Okay, so hi Gautam, I just read your question. It's your opinion if you feel that children under 18 should not have access to social media platforms. I unfortunately don't agree with you. Again, as I said, the way to deal, especially for young people, with anything is not prohibition, is not banned. That's my opinion. So we, of course, can agree to disagree. But I wouldn't suggest that because, first of all, it's their right to be on social media platforms, to express themselves, to find information or any, find peers and find communities that they want to be part of. And secondly, as I said before, this strategy of forcing children or forcing people to not be somewhere or banning somebody to not access that space doesn't really work, because it makes them want to access that space even more. So my suggestion or my opinion here would be to provide it in a age appropriate manner. And sex education, for example, is extremely important to be provided to children. And I'm not just talking about teenagers, but also children who are below 13 years of age. It is important that they have access to sex education. They understand what consent means. Only then can we look at a more holistic way of education, and not just, education in terms of, does this person is good at math or is good at English or good at any other subject. Yeah, so that was my answer to your question. Is there anything else? Okay, so now coming to the question around mental health. So see, with respect to mental health, there is obviously no sure short solution towards it, right? Because it's not something that we can just have. It's not something that we can have these sure short strategies and then that problem will be solved. So I would actually like to now that we have a good 30 minutes free, open up the session for a more discussion based Q&A, and then we can also discuss mental health there. Brinda, is that okay? Because I am more or less done with my presentation.
Sure. Then we can open the questions. I think, yeah.
Yeah. So
feel free to leave your questions either in the chat box, or you can raise your hand and your questions will be answered. Thank you.
Yeah. So with respect to mental health, I would suggest that we actually have a discussion instead of me giving all the answers, because as I said, there are no correct answers. So Akshay, if you have any suggestions, or if anyone else wants to talk about how they think we can manage mental health during when we are faced with gender-based violence and online threats.
Ma'am, actually, I have a question in the session. So, may I? Yes, ma'am. Actually, I just wanted to know about the what are the challenges faced by the LGBT community in the social media platform?
Okay. So again, I think it would be better if that question is answered by someone from the LGBTQ community. But I would say the challenges are similar to what a person from from this community would face in the real world, where they are harassed and ridiculed, first of all, for being LGBTQ. Because we still, even though technically our Supreme Court has read down Section 377, and we no longer, as a country, criminalize being LGBTQ, being homosexual. But that doesn't mean, as I said earlier also, just because a law has come up, or a law has, the court has said that, this is no longer a criminal offense, that doesn't mean that there will be a direct impact in the change of attitude in people, that people will suddenly overnight start accepting people from from the LGBT community. So I think one of the biggest challenges that people from the queer community face is of acceptance, where they are still not considered what is said as normal, or stigma, obviously, and discrimination. However, a lot of also LGBTQ people have shared how they actually find solace in online spaces, because online profile, creating an online profile of the person of their choice, where a trans person can be the person that they want to be, a trans woman can be the woman that she wants to be, or a gay man can freely express themselves in an online space, which they're actually unable to do in a physical space. And that is because they live with their parents, the parents don't understand, or they have not yet come out to their parents, so their parents don't know, and their their campus or their peers, their friends and family are not supportive. So there are always both positive and negative sides attached to anything. And the positive side here is that a lot of queer people find communities where they find like-minded people, they find people who think like them, who are like them. And that is a form of how digital spaces can also give you communities that you don't have in the real world, because you don't know those people, but you can find them online. So I would say that there is both, and that applies to anyone. That doesn't just apply to LGBTQ people, but it applies to anyone, where uh, digital spaces also give you that space to be who you are, if you are unable to be that person in your offline world, and to find like-minded people and to find your community. Yes, Amruta, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the answer, ma'am. So, and also like that, I have another question. So, in case of like, how a men can contribute for making the digital space a safer place for women? So, how can a man contribute to help?
Yes, that's a very important question. Thank you, Ritik. So I think, again, I would say it's similar to also how men can contribute in a offline world, in a physical space. Is, first of all, men who want to be allies to the feminist movement, who want to be allies to women's issues and gender issues or LGBTQ issues. In my opinion, the first thing that they should do is talk to their own friends and talk to their own peers. So, for example, if you are hanging out on the street with your male friends and a woman passes by and one of your friends passes a sexist remark, your responsibility there should be to call out your friend, to tell your friend that, hey, that's not cool and you shouldn't do that. that's just not okay. And in that same scenario, I think the same context can be applied online, where you see your friend or even any random person on the internet harassing or trolling a woman or a person from the LGBTQ community. You should call out that person and tell them how that this is not acceptable, and this is not cool, and they should change their behavior. I think small steps like these can really help in men talking to other men. And we have also seen, both from behavioral research, that behaviors and research, that men tend to listen to men more than they listen to women. So if I, as a woman, tell a guy that passing sexist remarks is not okay, it's not cool, it's not it's not acceptable, as opposed to another guy says that to him, the probability of this person listening to the man versus to me, a woman, is much higher. So I think the first responsibility of men in in a feminist movement or in the LGBTQ movement is to talk to their own peers and their own friends and families and explain them that their behaviors are not acceptable.
Yes, okay, ma'am. Thanks for the answer. And I request the participant to raise their hands if they have any questions, or if they want to just type in the chat box, I request them to type it. Uh, uh,
Yeah, I'll take up this question. Thanks, Samreen. So I completely agree with you. So at the moment, when it comes to the LGBTQ community, we are at a very nascent stage where we have just decriminalized homosexuality, but we have actually not put any laws in place to protect people from the queer community, people who identify as homosexuals, bisexuals, transgenders, uh, to protect them from violence, rape, etc. And one very shocking aspect of our law is that the punishment of raping a woman versus the punishment of raping a transgender person is very different, and the punishment uh, ranges from just 6 months to 2 years for transgender people, and for a woman it can range from 7 years to a lifetime. So it also shows how our government thinks that the rape of a transgender person is not as serious and heinous a crime as the rape of a woman, of a cisgender woman is. And that is really, really problematic. And we definitely need to have laws which are not just decriminalizing homosexuality and queer people, but are in favor of protection of queer community, of transgender people, and ensuring that they do not face stigma, discrimination, and are also protected from violence. So that was a very important point. Thank you for raising.
so yes, ma'am. And also, I have another question, ma'am. So, what are the types of challenges this disabled persons face in the online?
Can you repeat your question?
And what are the kinds of challenges do the disabled person who is accessing the internet or social media faces?
Okay. So again, I will speak from limited experience, as I am not somebody with a disability. As far as I understand, and this is mostly related to accessibility, that especially people who uh, who have visual impairment or hearing impairment are the ones who face accessibility issues the most when it comes to digital spaces. And as we also see, we do have a and sign language interpreter here, which is a great initiative. I first of all want to acknowledge and applaud HRF for ensuring that we have a sign language interpreter in this session. That's not something that happens very frequently in online sessions or in general at any kind of workshop or conference or webinars. So that's great that you people did it, and that's the first step in taking that this session is accessible. Now, many platforms, for example, are not accessible, especially they are not accessible for people with a visual impairment, because people who cannot see, who are blind, they are heavily dependent on screen readers to read to read that entire content which is on their screen, which is in front of them on the screen, and say it out loud so that they can listen to it. And that's so accessibility then is should be built in design of all digital platforms and spaces, but that's unfortunately not the case. So a lot of people with visual impairment are unable to read on or access a platform because it's not accessible. Secondly, because the internet also is a visual space, there are a lot of visual content that we see on the internet, like videos, posters, infographics, comics, memes, uh, any kind of visual content that is also not accessible, because a screen reader cannot read a visual. Like if there is a photograph, a screen reader cannot read a photograph, or they cannot read a poster. So when we are uploading any kind of visual content on the internet, it is this is a responsibility that each individual can take, is that they provide alt image description. So what this alt image description does is that it helps a screen reader to read what you are saying. So for example, if I take a picture of myself right now, which is I am sitting on my desk and there is a brown colored cabinet behind me, and on the other side there is a small bookshelf behind me. I am a woman with black long hair and I'm wearing glasses, and I'm wearing white earphones. This is the kind of alt image description images need for the screen reader to be able to read what exactly is in this image. So you have to actually describe each and everything, that there is a woman sitting in the center with black long hair, she's wearing spectacles, and this is her background. That's how images can become accessible. So these are some of the issues that I am aware of, that people with disabilities and especially people with visual impairment face on the internet.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that. So, is there any questions from the participants? So I think so. We don't have anyone, ma'am. So
Uh,
another question. I have another question, ma'am. So if it's a time, I can ask you.
yeah.
So it's like I just want to know what are the crimes or violences that are committed only depending on the community in the social media platform.
So can you repeat what all?
What are the crimes or violences that has taken place based on the community in the social media?
What do you mean by based on the community?
Community, it may be like a caste or what they depend on. So, is there any crimes happening on that?
You mean community in the sense, let's say caste or
Like,
gender? Is
yeah,
that
it's like a caste like that. No? Rather than genders, like a caste, is there any violence are happening in those social medias like that?
so? Like I don't know if there would be a different category of crimes. Like for example, I have already in the beginning of the session listed down, put out a list of different forms of online crimes that can happen. Now, when we are coming to communities and especially caste based communities, one thing that we have seen online is again a lot of stigma with respect to, and also ridicule. I think that would be a more appropriate word. Ridicule when it comes to you know, especially lower caste communities, or communities that are Dalit and Bahujan and Adivasi. So and there is a lot of harassment that is involved. Another thing that we have seen, but there is actually no confirmed data about this, is that sometimes platform themselves do shadow bans. Now shadow bans is something that is a concept that mostly I think comes from Twitter, maybe also Instagram, but I have read about this mostly on Twitter, and again, I'm not an expert on this topic. It's where somebody's account is shadow banned, where it's not directly banned, but it reduces that account's engagement and it reduces their visibility and reach. And recently, Twitter has been accused by a lot of activists of shadow banning Dalit Bahujan activists. Again, this is a claim, and there is no confirmation if this actually happened, but I think this is and can be one form of community based, I won't call it a crime, but more community based discrimination that's happening.
Yeah, okay, ma'am. So thanks for the answer. And is there anyone asking questions in the participant? So the time is just running out. So we may ask it. So it was up.
Hello,
Yeah.
Yes, hi.
this is Tabassum. Now, my question is, see, these days, generally what happens, there is a normal tiff between a teenager and a parent. So, in that case, how a parent, in a psychological perspective, how should a parent be able to, sort of give the child some kind of information that what is right and what is wrong without hurting the child's emotional level, because the child would want to explore a lot of things, but at the same time that might not be right for the child. So how do the parent go about it?
Yeah, so that's a very important question, and I understand where you're coming from. But as I said in the beginning, I am not a child psychologist. I'm not a psychologist, first of all. I'm a feminist activist, and I am not really sure if I can answer that question apart from what I've already said, that children do need age appropriate information. And uh, like, in my limited understanding, I would say that alienating children doesn't work at all, and just makes them go for that thing even more. But apart from that, I wouldn't want to comment, because this is something that really a professional child psychologist should talk about.
So at last we have only one question left. So as Nikita has raised her
Yeah.
hand, I request her to unmute herself and just
Yes.
ask the question.
Thank you, Hrithik. Hi, Japlin. Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't join the session in the beginning. I had a class at my course. So I'm pursuing an MA in Gender Studies at University of Hyderabad, and I've been following your work. And feminism in India
Thank
is
you.
the way I understand feminism in India. And thank you so much for your work and with your team. You've put up a fantastic resource for us to learn from. My question is as a student of gender studies, I'm just trying to understand how like, for example, I mean, I've got a lot of thoughts going on in my head, so I'll try and simplify it a bit. So at this point of time, we are at this fifth wave feminism, right? So where we're using technology. Technology is a big part of feminism and the movement today. So how do you see technology being used, and how do you see it being abused, and what is it that students of gender studies or feminist activists can do to make the to make a feminist view of technology in a way? Like, how do you
Yeah.
get that justice, feminism, activism, empowerment, and how do you kind of marry all of these concepts? And seeing your experience, and I've seen the kind of comments you've received on Twitter and the comments you receive on your blog. So I'm sure you have an experience in how do you handle such complexities. So if you can
Yeah.
share your views, that'll be great.
Yeah, thank you. That's a question that I can answer. So, first of all, re-technology. There are two things that I feel like we need to understand when we are approaching technology. Like we need to be conscious of those two things. One is that um, all these platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Google, etc., they are businesses. They are profit making platforms. They are not charities. So if we are not paying to access the platform, especially like if you have a free Gmail account, or you use a Facebook account, you have an Instagram account, you're not paying for any of those services, right? But the platform is a business. So how are they running? Like how are they running the platform? So then data sharing, using our data to customize ads which are targeted towards us, is one of their biggest revenue model, if I were to call it that. And which is why we need to be conscious of what we are sharing on the platform. I'm not saying that we don't share. You can share whatever you want, but you should be aware of what you are doing. Like self-awareness there is really important. So that's the first thing, that we need to be self-aware of these platforms and how we are working, how we are using them. The second thing is that we need to not see technology as something which is neutral, because it's not. See, what is technology? It's artificial intelligence which is created by humans, and those humans are us. Like us sitting in the Zoom call are those same people who create this technology. So those biases that we have in our real world, that those humans have, they may or may not be reflected in that technology, and a lot of times it actually is reflected. So I'll give you an example. I don't know if you people have heard of this, but a couple of years back, Microsoft introduced a bot on Twitter called a Tay bot. I'll just quickly yeah. So Tay was an artificial intelligence chat bot that was originally released by Microsoft Corporation on Twitter in March 2016. Now, this bot was taken down by Microsoft in less than 24 hours of its launch. So if it was launched on March 23rd, 2016, it was taken down on that same day in 16 hours. The reason why? Because the bot went rogue. The bots, it was designed in a way where it was supposed to see how other people are behaving and writing and responding on Twitter, and then using that. I mean, it is AI, it's artificial intelligence. Using that, then behaving in a certain manner, in a similar manner. So within those 16 hours, that bot went from "Hi, I am Tay, and I'm a new bot on Twitter" to feminists are Nazis and they deserve to die. Like that was the timeline of that bot within 16 hours. Now, what we need to understand is that bot was taking information from the Twitterverse that it was consuming and experiencing. So artificial intelligence is not, or technology in general, is not separate from human behavior. I would really ask you to read up on this Tay bot. I can also just quickly send the Wikipedia page here, which will give a very basic information, but there are multiple articles on this that you can check out, of how the bot went rogue and it had to be taken down in less than 24 hours. What it tells us is how technology is not neutral. And again, what I said before, the same world that we live in the offline world, is reflected on the internet. So it's not anything different, and the same prejudices and biases that people have in the real world are then also on the in the digital world, in the online world. Now, coming to the second part of your question, um, regarding what can we do. So this is also really important, that, as I said, like the internet is not all bad. I hope that's not the takeaway from this session. That was not the point. The internet is not bad. it's just how it is. It's how our world is. Our world is good and bad, and the same, the internet is also good and bad, right? And there are also positive sides, as I've explained earlier, that there are communities that you can form, or like the biggest example of what I have done with FII. We started with a blog, and today we are a media organization. We are functional in 2 languages, and we have created so many spaces. So this is also one, I would say, a counter narrative, or a way to create safe spaces for yourself, or for people who think like you, who are like-minded people, to have also create a more positive and feminist, and whatever thing that you care for, that kind of internet. I would also direct you to some resources. So you can, first of all, I mean, you already know FII, so that's great. But apart from that, you can check out this campaign called Take Back the Tech. So I'll just write this down here. It's a campaign by an organization called APC. And Take Back the Tech is a campaign which is, as the name says, it's talking about reclaiming the technology and reclaiming the internet as a space. It is a campaign on gender-based violence online. So it's very relevant to the topic that we are discussing here today. And it is run by this organization called apc.org. So you should definitely check out their website and their Twitter or whatever social media handles. They also not just run campaigns in their own organization, but they also support other small feminist campaigners, and they have also supported FII this year and also in the past, to run campaigns which are about gender-based violence, and what are the different ways that feminists and women's rights activists or LGBTQ activists are creating a safe space, or are creating their own space in this bad and wide internet, to take back the tech. So that is one very interesting and important resource that you can check out. And secondly, one thing that I always say is that the internet is a public space. So think of internet as going out on the street, like you being online on Twitter, or any platform that you are, is the same as going out on the streets. And the more women and marginalized genders and sexualities there are on the internet, the safer it will be for other people. So it's the same logic that we say about public spaces, right? That if at night I go out and I see some other women also there hanging out or just doing whatever, I would feel safer, as opposed to if I'm the only woman there on that street and there are just men around me. So that same logic can be applied to the internet, that we need to, as women, as feminist activists, as LGBTQ people, we need to create those safe spaces for ourselves, but also for other people, to be able to join them, and to be able to be reassured that they are also there for them. So it's more of a community narrative, building a community narrative on different kinds of feminist spaces and queer spaces, that as much as we can create, and take back the tech.
As well,
I
sorry
hope
to
that
interrupt,
answered
ma'am.
the question.
Is
Yeah,
this okay,
I'm
Yes, you
ma'am?
done,
have.
don't worry.
Okay, ma'am, sorry for that. So actually, the questions are done. So we are just running out of time. So thank you for your brief explanation and clarification about what are the modes of crimes and then violation, gender violation are happening in the social media, and how to prevent it, and also what are the kinds of law and other things that are helping us to report these crimes, and also how to secure ourselves from these kind of crimes. It was very informative session, ma'am, and also those your reply to those comments was very effective, and we also learned a lot things from those answers too. So these things were very helpful for me. So
Thank
thanks a
you.
lot for your time and conversation. I request Vrinda ma'am to take over the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Japlin, for this session. It was very, very nuanced and very informative. I'm sure the researchers and the other students found a lot of value in it. Um I would like to thank the audience also for being a part of this session today and continuing to be. Many of you have been coming for most of our other sessions as well. I request you all to continue, keep coming back, because we have the campaign running till December 10th. And if any of your researchers or students would like to moderate one of these sessions, I will leave the email address in the chat box. Request you all to send us an email with your information, and we can find you a session to moderate during this campaign as well. Roshan, could you please share the information on tomorrow's session? Tomorrow we have a session happening on women in media, and we have the editor-in-chief of the News Minute, Danya Rajendran, and Vasanthi Hariprakash, journalist and founder of Pickle Jar, joining us tomorrow. So request you all to join in tomorrow as well. Thank you so much.